Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. With good news. I've had a lot of people send this to me. I waited a couple days to make sure we got all the facts straight, but it looks like we could live to see the day when robocalls could end. I don't think it's going to happen soon, but it could happen in our lifetimes. Now, I'm older than many of you, so maybe that's good news, but here's the deal. Um, a bill has been launched in Washington, D.C., and it's actually made a little bit of headway on the issue of robocalls. And we've talked about this before. If you've got a phone like a landline, like I do from my office, it rings all day long, and about 5 to 10 times a day, it's robodialers. And I've even done videos where I've messed around with these people. I've had them swear at me. I'm going to put a couple of those videos below just for the fun of it. But the point is that they're trying to sell you stuff and they're trying to rip you off. They'll claim that they've got, a better credit card rate for you. They've got a warranty for your car. And sometimes they'll just try to rip you up by saying things like, we are the IRS. And if you don't send us, gift cards or something, we're going to have you arrested, things like that. So the robocallers are a scourge on the face of the planet. And we've been complaining about them for some time now. So like these things go, people in Washington finally decided, hey, let's actually stop for a second and try to accomplish something. So the Senate has now passed an act called the Traced Act, which of course is a typical one of these acronyms for the Telephone Robocall Abuse, Criminal Enforcement, and Deterrence Act. And I've always wondered, what if they had a law where they couldn't come up with a cool term like that? Would they actually just say, screw it, we'll wait until we can come up with a better acronym? Or would they somehow play with it and make it work? But, some of these things are pretty cool and some of them are just silly. But, you trace a phone call, right? So the Senate passed the Traced Act to enhance TCPA enforcement power. And there was a law called the TCPA, which is not cool because you can't pronounce it, right? But that law was toothless, as we say, because the bulk of the calls that we're getting are spoofed phone calls from overseas. And I've been saying for years that the technology must be out there for someone to actually put an end to this. And I've had a lot of people go, it's impossible. They can't possibly do it. Well, that's the party line from the phone companies because they don't want to be forced to stop this because they make money off it. So just the other day, the U.S. Senate approved the Telephone Robocall Abuse, Criminal Enforcement, and Deterrence Act by an overwhelming 97-1 vote. Senator Rand Paul voted against the bill. And I'm sure he had a great reason to do that. Whenever you see a 97-1 vote, the first question always is, who's the knucklehead who voted against it? And you go, okay. I'm not calling Rand Paul a knucklehead. I'm just pointing out that he's going against the grain here, and I'm sure he's got some wacky reason as to why he went against the grain in this one. The bipartisan bill was originally introduced in November of 2018 by U.S. Senator John Thune, who's from South Dakota, and Senator Ed Markey, who's from Massachusetts. And if passed, the act would expand the TCPA, giving the FCC authority to level civil penalties or levy them, depending which word you want to use, of up to $10,000 per call for intentional violations, as if any of these are accidental. It also extends the statute of limitations for violations of the TCPA to 3 years. So in the old days, one of the reasons that the FCC apparently gave as to why they weren't enforcing the act is it takes us more than a year to track down who's making these phone calls. Guess what, dude? Now you got 3 years. Knock yourself out. Notably, the Traced Act also expands TCPA enforcement powers to the Department of Justice, the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Commerce, the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and other federal agencies, as well as state attorneys general and non-federal entities. And so, as I'm sure you know, when you want the government to do something, the more committees and agencies they assign to the task, the more efficient the process becomes. So I'm glad to see that they're drilling down on this and they're going to get this to happen. Like I said, I don't have a lot of faith in this. The act has garnered support from 54 state and territory attorneys general, all of the FCC and FTC commissioners, and industry and consumer groups alike. So as noted, as far as we can tell, the only person who's opposed to this right now, Senator Rand Paul. So the act now goes before the House of Representatives, where it awaits approval. And as we've noted before, bills can go through permutations and evolve over time. So we don't know if the House will pass it as drafted or rewrite it and pass it, in which case it's got to go back. I will refer you to Schoolhouse Rock as to how that all works. But in theory, it can get passed by both houses and then sent to the president, and the president could sign it, and then it could become law. And of course, if it became law, what would it do? Because we've already pointed out that the TCPA, which has been in the books for years, is pretty much meaningless. It's what we call a trap for the stupid. But many, many people violate it because they're overseas and nobody can stop them, and the phone companies pretend that they can't do anything about it. So the Traced Act's provisions include broadening the FCC's authority to levy civil penalties, or level them, as noted earlier, of up to $10,000 per call on callers who intentionally flout telemarketing restrictions. Again, they should just presume intention on this. Has anybody ever accidentally called you and tried to offer you something without realizing they were doing it? Extending the window for the FCC to catch and take civil enforcement action against intentional violations for up to 3 years, which they note here is a substantial increase from 1 year. I could break out, don't make me break out the whiteboard. If I have to explain to you the difference between 1 and 3 and how 3 is substantially bigger than 1, I will. Don't. You're lucky I can't reach it. Okay, it's literally 18 inches. I bet right there. I could do it, but I won't. Requiring a range of entities to identify and report to Congress on improving deterrence and criminal prosecution of robocall scams. Entities referenced in the press release include the Department of Justice, the FCC, the Federal Trade Commission, Department of Commerce, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and other relevant federal agencies as well as state attorneys. Okay, I did that because I already read the list earlier. Now here's the thing. It also directs the FCC to initiate a rulemaking to help protect subscribers from receiving unwanted calls or texts. Remember that do not call list that we all put our numbers on years ago, and that it was violated immediately to the point where you go, what is this do not call list? Why do we have this? It doesn't work. It turns out that the FCC is going to look into that. And then here's the other thing, and this is the one that gives me the glimmer of hope. It's the faintest of hopes. You know, when you hear like a volcanic eruption has wiped out an entire island, you come by and there's smoldering ash covering the entire island. There's no life on the island at all. Nothing there. And it cools down to the point where you can set foot on the island and you can walk around like David Attenborough. And you're walking around talking about the volcanic ash and how it destroyed everything on this island. And then you look down and you see just a little speck of green, and you realize it's the top half of a plant breaking through that ash, and you realize if that plant makes it, if it actually unfurls and gets some sunlight to shine on its leaf, it might take root and live and thrive, and maybe other plants will do this. That little glimmer of hope is what I'm about to read you right here. As for other requirements, the bill that has now been reintroduced would require voice providers to implement an appropriate and effective call authentication framework in their internet protocol networks within 18 months of the bill's enactment. The FCC would have the option of granting extension for providers that demonstrate substantial hardship in purchasing or upgrading their equipment to support call authentication. But you saw the loopholes there, right? They can be granted extensions, and they got 18 months to begin with. But the point is that they are going to require some people in this network to actually implement something to require the calls that you receive on your phone to match up with who's actually calling you. Why didn't anybody think of that earlier? Can you imagine if the technology existed for the phone company to actually, like, suppose there was a screen or something on your phone. Can you imagine, like, if you had a phone that had a screen on it, can you imagine what I'm talking? And if when someone calls you and the phone were to ring, you could read that screen and it actually identified the caller. I mean, I'm surprised nobody thought of this earlier. I I'm joking, of course, but my point is, I've spoken to people who said, look, the phone companies could, if they wanted to, make it be a direct connection in the concept that the incoming call is identified properly, or if it's not identified properly, then the incoming call can't complete. The FCC is charged with this now, but it seems like people in Congress at least seem to think this could work. And I assume that the reason that this bill got out of committee is they probably had hearings on it. And somebody came in and said, yeah, I'm sure it would work. This is the way to do it. It's just no one wants to do it right now because the phone companies are making too much money off this. But this is what happens when something gets abused to the point where hundreds of millions of Americans are getting dozens of calls a day that all violate federal law and nobody cares. And everybody kind of says, oh, and it turns out that enough people got ticked off where people in Congress finally said, okay, we have to do this. That is everyone in Congress and the Senate except for Senator Rand Paul. And again, I'm not calling Rand Paul out on his politics here. Don't care. Like I said, when you see a 97-1 vote, you got to ask yourself, is it on principle? Or does he really like robocalls? I don't know. But like I said, I'm generally an optimistic person. But when it comes to the legislature in Washington, D.C. doing the right thing and actually creating a law that has teeth and accomplishes its task, I'm a pessimist in that respect. And I'm sorry. I shouldn't be, but I've been an attorney for 28 years. That's what it does to you. So if robocalls end in our lifetime, I'll be happy. If they end sooner than that, I'll be even happier. But like I said, we have three things that got to get done. You got to have one house pass it, then the other house has got to pass it, and then the president's got to sign it. And I'm simplifying this because I understand that it could get modified and conferenced and so on. But I'm simply pointing out that we are literally at the first step of at least 3 steps. And again, it can get modified in the process. It could just fail to pass one of them, or it could get vetoed. We'll see what happens. But like I said, there's a hope. It's a glimmer of hope. It's a hint of a rumor of a glimmer of hope. And it could happen. So we'll see. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.